Hey guys, so now it's time to move into the second big issue to work on, and it's something called boundaries. You might have heard that word. If you've ever heard me speak on this, I tell a story I'll tell you now if you haven't. It's about one day I was at the hospital and a family came to see me, and it was a mom and a dad and two of their adult children in their 20s, a young man, young woman. I sit down and I said to the dad, so how can I help you? He said, well, I want you to fix my son. I said, well, where's he? And the father says, he didn't want to come. I said, why not? And he says, well, he doesn't think he has any problems. I said, well, maybe he doesn't. He said, oh, yes, he does. I said, well, he's not here. What are his problems? And he says, well, first of all, we know he's got a drug problem. I said, well, that can be serious. What's he on? He says, well, he's been smoking dope since he was about 15. I said, how old is he now? He said, he's 23. I said, okay, so he's mellow. What's the next problem? He said, well, he's flunked out of 3 colleges. Now, my first thought was, how do you do that? I mean, literally, I don't know how to do that. And I said to him, how do you do that? And he said, well, he did. I said, I know how you flunk out of college, the first one. How do you get into the second one? He says, same way I got him in the first one. He didn't have the grade. I'm on the board of a lot of, I got him in. And then he said, you know what, doctor? He said, I got him in that second college. I didn't want him all that partying in the dorm, so I bought him a nice condo off campus and didn't want him to have to work and interfere with studying, so I gave him plenty of money. Yeah, he flunked out again. I said, imagine that, kids, like parties don't travel, right? He said, then he flunked out, he said, and then you saw the father's heart. He changed for a moment and kind of opened up and he said, but the thing that bothers me the most, he's 23 years old. He doesn't even have a college major. He said, when I was 23, I had started 3 companies. I thought for a second, and I said, well, where's he today? He said, well, he didn't want to. I said, I know he didn't want to come, but where might I find him? He said, oh, he's in Vail. I said, Colorado? He said, yeah. And I said, what's he doing there? He said, he's skiing. Thought for a second, turned to him, I said, sir, I'm sorry, but I'm a psychologist, and I help people with problems, and I don't think I can help your son. He said, why not? And I said, because frankly, I don't think he has any problems. He's got plenty of money, he's got a new home, he didn't have any problems, I can't help him. I said, but you on the other hand, I can help you, because you got a lot of problems. He said, what are you talking about? I said, you got a drug problem, you got a can't find my niche problem, you got a flunk out of school. He goes, that's not me, that's my, I said, you think so? He's in Vail skiing, all right? His biggest problem is, do I have time for one more run before lunch? I said, he's in Vail skiing? I said, but you're in a psychiatric hospital. You know what kind of people come to psychiatric hospitals? People with problems. I am going to help you to help him to have some problems. I'm going to teach you something called boundaries. He looked at me like my German Shepherd would when she didn't understand something. He kind of tilts her head. And I started to explain, look, a boundary is basically a property line, okay? It defines what the property you own, what you control, what you're responsible for, how you're free to use it. And then you have a neighbor over here, and they're on their own property, and there's a fence in between. And each one of you is responsible for your own property. Well, what happens if that neighbor starts to not take responsibility for their own property and they don't cut their trees and they fall into your yard over the fence? What does the Bible call that? It calls it trespassing, coming over the fence. And see, because there aren't any fences that define what's your problems and your responsibility versus what's his, he's out of control, but the consequences of those problems are falling in your yard. It's the basic law of sowing and reaping the Bible talks about. See, when you set a limit on somebody, a boundary, and say, you know what you're doing is really affecting me and I want you to take responsibility for that, then what you're doing is you're creating a limit. The Bible has 1,000 different ways to describe this, but that limit contains that problem and it holds somebody responsible for dealing with it themselves. Now, my hunch is you and I, all of us, we can identify with somebody in that story. You might be the sibling or the adult sibling, or he might be the parent, or it might be an extended family member that's got, maybe they're an alcoholic or they're irresponsible, or maybe they got a rage problem where they throw their rage at you all the time and it trespasses and it hurts you. And what you keep doing is doing something we call enabling, because it enables for them to not have to face their problem. So what a boundary does is it says no. We start out in life and we say yes to love, and then you get enough love, and about the second year, you learn another word because you get separate, right? And you start to have your own life a little bit, and the toddler goes out and turns around and says, no. That's their favorite word. But they also have to learn to receive no and to hear no. Now, the Bible, we're taught as Christians, be loving and accepting and patient and forgiving and all that, but sometimes people live out that half of the scriptures, that's the grace side, but there's a truth side. And the Bible also says that as we're being loving, that we have to speak the truth in love, and we have to stand up and say, that's not okay. This is affecting me. Also, where you're in control of your own time, energy, resources, all of that, where you get to choose what you're going to give to somebody and what you're not, instead of being manipulated and controlled into it. A lot of these symptoms we talk about, depression, anxiety, addictions, or relationship struggles, or even performance ability. How are you going to reach a goal in your life if you can't say no to manipulation? You want to go take this course, or that's going to take time, and your friends or your pastor or somebody says, well, if you really love me, you spend that time with me, and they put that guilt trip on you, you're never going to get there. 2 Corinthians 9:7 says this about our giving, because I'm not talking about living a selfish life here. I'm talking about living a life on purpose. We want to be giving, but you want to be giving to needs, where people take what you give them, and as the Bible says, when you've had a talent invested in you, there's a return for it. See, we give to needs, we don't give to irresponsibility. We give to needs, we don't give to funding addictive, out of control, irresponsible, rage attack kinds of behavior. Because when you're given to that, whatever we invest in is going to grow. So, for example, you say to that young man, look, I'll be glad to fund your education, but it's going to come with some truthful requirements, some expectations. The next check is going to come when I get the grades from the previous quarter, and I know that you're doing what you're supposed to do, then I'll write the next check. Or if somebody's an addict, what do we say? I'll be glad to help you, but not by bailing you out one more time, but by, if you agree to go to treatment or go to a program, I'll help and I'll participate in that. So you gotta ask yourself, in your giving, what are you funding? Are you funding future pain? Or are you funding life? See, that's what we want to give to. Another aspect of this is when somebody's doing something hurtful. The Bible says we're to be patient, long-suffering, but patience and long-suffering doesn't begin, really, until we've stood up and said, here's the program, and I'll be patient and long-suffering with you while you go through recovery, or while you go through therapy, or while you're trying to change. Certainly I'll be patient with that, but I won't be patient and continue to be abused forever. Go to Matthew 18. It's one of the greatest examples of boundaries that you see. And what it says is, if somebody hurts you, you go to them and you talk to them in private. And then it says, if they listen and they're wise, you've won them over. You solve the problem. Limit set, they fix their tree, okay? But it says this, if they don't listen, what does it say do? Well, continue to nag them for 5 years. Continue to try to get them to be better. Doesn't say that. It says get a little stronger boundary. It says get a couple of people to go with you. Sit down with them and say, you know what? We've all experienced this, and this hurtful behavior, it's not okay. And you do a little bit of a mini intervention. And then it goes from there to a further one. It says, you start to increase the group size. That's a formal intervention, for example. And then it says, finally, the biggest boundary is, well, if you're not going to get sober, you can't live here. Or if you're going to continue to get drunk and ruin every family, Thanksgiving dinner, then this year you can't come till we see some sort of change. Basically, the final boundary says some sort of separation. that's aimed at getting some change. So see, this thing about boundaries is not being unloving. No more being unloving than a parent who says no to their kid that wants to run in the street. That's a boundary. How many parents would do better instead of trying to get kids to, come to dinner and nagging them for an hour, say dinner's at 6, this isn't a drive-through, show up at 6, you're gonna get some food, dinner closes at 6:45, and then everything's cleaned up and they come in hungry and say, sorry, we'll feed again tomorrow. Boundaries are about self-control. I don't want everybody else having control of you anymore. I want you to have control of you. That's what the Bible says is the fruit of the Spirit. So when you get back in control and stop the abuse, you may need help. You may need a group. You may need to do an intervention. You may need to just have a difficult conversation. You get back in control, and all these symptoms are going to start to be healed.